Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Welcome back to the Rainmaker Podcast. I have to tell you that the timing of this podcast guest was like so perfect, so divine for me because I'm in the process of releasing my first ever marketing book into the world, January 2025. And Genieva is not just like a PR expert, man. The way that she approaches pitching and putting her clients out there for gain is something I haven't heard before. I think we're all accustomed or have heard, you got a book, do a big podcast tour, podcast tour, podcast tour. And she, right from the jump, was like, I don't subscribe to the same conventional wisdom around a podcast tour. I have a different approach that it's more impactful. And so right from the top of the podcast, we get into it before we even get into her story and how she became what she is, and having this like high threshold for no's, which I think is such a great way of putting it. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this podcast. It was a little bit more on the selfish side for me because I got to ask her some probing questions with regards to my own book. So I hope that that was fruitful for you to hear the same answers that she gave me. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Genieva. Genieva, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited too. So we have a mutual beloved friend, our beautiful Paige Griffith from the Legal Page. So that's always fun. That is the commonality to start. Number two, the timing of this podcast, selfishly for myself, is perfect because I am on the road to releasing my first ever marketing book called Identity Marketing, coming January 2025. I've worked a lot with different clients who also are published book authors, and I feel like one of the biggest ways that they get their book out there and they promote the hell out of it is with really, a podcast tour. And I know when I worked for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and they were doing their big KBB launches at the time, I mean, Dean would do anywhere between 100 to 200, if not more, podcast on all of his friends' platforms in conjunction with the launch. So people use podcasting for launching of products, services. They certainly obviously do it for books. It's a big, I think, very popular, common strategy. I will tell you that I track the quality of traffic that comes back to me from podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't always been thrilled at the results of said podcasting. And even though I love doing it, I don't know if it's the greatest traffic generator in the world, or at least I haven't experienced that unless it's like a colossal podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have a really unique take on this, which I'm really excited for you to talk about because there is the podcast tour and then there's what you actually recommend to make it better than what most probably think of. So can we dive into your unconventional approach to podcasting and touring?
Yes. Well, first off, congrats on the book. That is an
Thank you.
accomplishment. So
Thank you.
just
Thank you,
wanted to
sister.
say
Thank
congrats
you.
on that. That is so exciting. I can't wait to see when that's all coming out. But for me, I love a podcast tour. That is great. But what I believe in is a podcast and features tour, and that they should go hand in hand. So what I mean by that is a lot of us kind of know what a pod tour is, right? We are going and having ourselves pitched to be on a bunch of podcasts to talk about topics. And we hope that it will bring value to their audience in a way that will drive traffic back to us, right? So we kind of all know this traditional setting of the podcast tour, but also a features tour going hand in hand with it would be landing those articles, whether they are print or online. So with this features tour, we are wanting to land in a lot of places. People will come to me and they're like, I just want Forbes articles. And Forbes is powerful. That is true. That is great. But we want to make sure in our features tour, we are also having all types of articles, medium to large size, because there's power there to the big names like Forbes will bring us that notoriety, that household name, right? That thought leadership. But having a bunch of features of all types of sizes also helps us to write our Google search, that when people search for us, they see pages and pages and pages of people saying, yes, they are the expert, and not just your own website saying, look at what all of my clients said that I handpicked these testimonials and put them on my site, right? So that's kind of what the podcast and feature tour would look like.
Okay, hold on. Because it's funny, you bring up SEO. Back in the day, baby Veronica marketer, I started in SEO. I was an SEO account manager at my first ever agency, and man, that game has changed since then. But I get what you're saying, which is like one thing is to have place in my ears. Another thing is to also have my face visible on web assets that could also surface up if somebody were to type in Veronica Romney, type in identity marketing, type in whatever. But I think it's so funny that we are literally talking about this today, because earlier I was personally voxing with my friend Selena Sue, who is also in your world of
Mhm.
PR. And I was telling her, I'm like, I think I have like kind of this like mindset block a little bit. I see myself, and I say this not to make this about me, but because I think a lot of listeners might relate. I see myself more in a position to help others. And so when it's time for me to possibly raise my hand and ask for help, it's wildly uncomfortable sometimes. And so like even asking to be on somebody's podcast or landing the feature. Now, you do this every single day, like it's nobody's business. Like you just pitch away. And so I'm just curious, like, what's it like now? Like, from your perspective, how has it changed since you first started doing pitching? What would be some of your secrets today? Or how would you help people like myself kind of get out of their own way, if we're being really honest, too?
Yeah, so this is such a good question, and it's really comes to the heart and the core of why I am passionate about this, especially as women business owners. It is not a common thing that we are wanting to pitch ourselves, right? We don't really have that skill, we don't flex that skill. Maybe even as we're like younger in high school or college, we don't really learn that quite as much. And so it really is a skill that we're learning to say, no, I am the expert. No, I want a seat at that table. No, I can help you with that. And so it is just remember that you're practicing a skill. So whether you're pitching yourself or you're hiring someone to pitch you, to put yourself out there, it's a skill. So it might feel uncomfortable at first, and that's okay. But I do watch my clients as we land more and more, they get more and more confident to ask for higher rates while speaking, to put themselves out there for bigger names, to, you know, just pitch to bigger clients even. It ends up overflowing into their business. So first I just want to say it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable and it is a new skill, but that's all right. Now, to answer your question of what is a good tip for people or what would I kind of say is a lot of times I think when the podcast tour was beginning, it was kind of like, I want to be on your podcast. Here's what I can talk about, right? And we really have seen the industry change, I think, in everyone's marketing and as well as in pitches of they want to know how are you going to serve my audience or how are you going to serve me? Like people really want this direct kind of phrasing or saying this is what I can bring to you versus like here is why you need to showcase me. So inside of your pitches, if you are looking over kind of like a base template you write and you see that it's mostly all about you and your bio is the majority of the email, that's a red flag. That's like a, oh my gosh, I'm just talking about me and saying why I'm great. Where instead we want it to be, here is how I can serve you and your audience. And this is something our dear friend Paige has always been really good at as well, is thinking, how do I network? How do I give to people in a way that I am serving their audience? She's such a good example of that. And that's something that we really want to think of inside of our pitching. And so that even comes down to in your topics. You want them to, even the way we phrase them, are we showing like, hey, we already came up with a really cool episode title name for you, right? You don't even have to think about the title name. And here is like a little tiny blurb showing why your audience is going to love it, that's written specifically for your audience, not just like a generic business owners will like it, but like here's why your owners are going to like it. And what I find, going back to what you said of like, sometimes I don't really see the ROI on it, the more niche that we are getting in pitching to the correct places, as well as making sure the topics in the pitch is saying your audience specifically what is going to find value, the more my clients have a really good ROI and
Mm-hmm.
they are booking those sales calls you might want to see or getting the increased subscribers and things like that. So to sum it up, I would say make sure you are thinking of their audience and how you are serving them and less about how you are amplifying yourself, right?
Mm.
Just being short about you and more about them.
I'm just like marinating on what you just expressed. And I do think that Paige is one of the best at this. This comes up for me. So I remember talking to Paige at an event. She came to one of my events when she was inside the Rainmaker residency because we do these 2 a year fulfillment events. And people were picking her brain, like, how many affiliates do you have? Oh my gosh, how'd you do that? Like, right? Like, we're all just kind of off her. And the one thing that she expressed in the room was she's like, she does these like voice memos or she'll like DM people with voice memos or whatever. Now, I've been behind the scenes of other clients where their team is dominantly the responsible party when it comes to pitching. And then I've heard from people like a Paige where like, no, I do the personal outreach, at least at first before involving team members. Have you noticed one path being more successful of a take than others? Like how much does the visionary, like, or the book author or the whoever, the speaker, the whatever title, insert whatever personal brand title, right? How much does that person leveraging their voice, their authority, them versus having the team actually do a lot of the work or like work in pitching you? I'm just curious if you've seen that.
Yeah, so there are, yes, this is such a good point because especially for those big name podcasts, and so I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to throw out names like Jenna Kutcher, Jasmine
Mm-hmm.
Star, right? Those big names, we want the personal touch.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming from me specifically might not bring that, and we know that there are probably hundreds of pitches coming to them, maybe an hour, right? They're gonna get a lot. And
Seriously.
so we still incorporate that personal touch from her where she may be beginning it in the DMs and then pushing it over to us. Or
Okay.
some of them I have a connection with from past clients or other things.
Sure.
And so I'm kind of bringing it in and then giving that personal touch and then pushing it back to me to finish the admin scheduling side, right? And so it's going to ebb and flow and change. But yes, having that personal touch is also important
Mm-hmm.
to, especially the bigger ones. But there is a piece of it that it is okay to make sure that there are other places where pitching and they're just as happy to work with your team and people and saying like, yes, we specifically saw you, let's use Paige or you
Mm-hmm.
specifically, we saw you as a fit for them. And
Mm-hmm.
they were really excited about the potential of working, really including them
Mm-hmm.
into it and showing that they have that. But then some of those ones that are going to be really competitive, making sure we do keep in the CEO a little bit to bring that personalized touch because otherwise you're going to get lost in the masses of
Sure.
all the pitches they are receiving day to day. And finding
Sure.
those ways that we can stand out is so key because they are getting a lot. So whether it
Mm-hmm.
is a voice memo or me or a client starting in the DMs, whether it is an email, but we have like a
Mm-hmm.
really unique and not clickbaity subject line, but
Mm-hmm.
making it pop in some way or making it really clear, starting the subject line with podcast guest recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like making it, I'm not trying to sell you, I'm not trying to trick you to opening this. Do you need some guests? Here's a great one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really leaning into that and just being real people about it, right? What people need guests. So let's be real. What do they actually need? And who is really going to want to have that one-on-one touch with the CEO versus the team or bringing it all together?
Mm.
And that varies for podcasts or sometimes with speaking or podcast sponsorships. I'll pitch and say, like, hey, we would be interested. And then we hop on a call and the CEO might come to the call or not. So finding the ways to bring in the personal versus also respecting the CEO's time and their
Mm-hmm.
calendar and their brain space because they are the visionary.
Hey Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. I'm curious, like, the one thing that comes up is now, like, okay, so we answered the question on who is best when, but then there comes the how of like, okay, so let's say I want to pitch, insert anyone's name, right? And let's say I mean, at this point, either I don't know them whatsoever, but we have so many friends in common, or, even somebody super, super, super cold. Like, I don't know you at all, or I know of you and you definitely don't know anything about me, kind of thing, right? Like the distance away. It's almost like a LinkedIn profile, like how many connections away from each other. The how of like, how the hell do you even start that first voice memo or that first, like, like that, I think, and not that I want to get so prescriptive and scripty, but like, I'm curious. I think that's without Chat GPT writing this shit for us. How have you been able to also say the right thing to get somebody's attention? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we have to remember we're all people. Yes, we're business owners. Yes, some are like 7, 8 figure, these big facing like this
Sure.
huge thing, but we're all people. And so people
Mm-hmm.
like connection, they might like story and finding that piece that brings connection. Now, I've seen this done really poorly where it's like, I loved your dog, or like from the last post that they just like go look at the last post and they're
Yeah.
like, the dog was cool that you had there, whatever.
Love your onesie. What?
Yeah, like very, it's like, okay, you were just trying to find that. But if it's like, I've been following you a long time, you really helped me with this. For example, with Paige, right? I was telling you how I connected with Paige. I had been using her services, her legal services for things for my business. When I
Totally.
went to pitch to ask if she needed some help with pitching, I said, hey, I've been using this for a long time. You have such great resources here. I really love what Legal Page is doing, whatever. I saw you were needing some help, would love to chat. Feel free to send an email or, whatever, and leaving it like that. So you'll see I kept it super brief. It wasn't some long pitch, some crazy thing. It was real people of like, you really helped me when I had no idea how to start an LLC. And then it was, so I understand you and your network. And then it was, if you'd like to talk more about this and how I can serve you in this quick little way, you feel free to reach out to me, and letting them feel peace and calmness about the pitch versus we've all had them in our DMs of like a novel and it's like, I could help you and book this all now, and we feel that it almost feels that car salesy way. That's not what we
Yeah.
want to come across. We want a personal touch, and then we want them to feel empowered that it is in their hands and it is their choice. And this isn't some pushy thing where, like I mentioned, a car salesman, we've been to those lots where you're like, please just give me a second to think or breathe or like look at this. Remember how you would want to feel too. So personal touch or story, as well as keep it chill, keep
Yeah.
it calm.
Okay. All right. The like anxiety is starting to come down.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me ask you. I have a book coming out. So
Mhm.
how would, if I wanted to get my book in someone's hands, or if I wanted to, if that could lead to more opportunities, features, podcasts, whatever, anything like that. Like, is it as simple as like, hey, I want to gift you something, or I'm really, I mean, like, yeah,
Mhm.
work it out here. Like, help me out here.
Yes. So I think what I want to anchor this with, we're going to talk about what we would do for that, but what I want to anchor this with is we have this fear of the no.
Mm-hmm.
And I just
Mm-hmm.
want to say, we are all going to get no's, right?
Oof.
And the reason that I got into pitching in general was when I was in high school, honestly, is where I see this going back to. I realized no one was going to be able to pay for college for me. I was like, I'm just going to start pitching myself to local businesses and to every single scholarship I can. I got a lot of no's, right? Majority no's. But by the end of it, I had paid for college without me having to pay for anything because I had
It's
pitched myself
wild.
over time.
It's wild.
Did I get a lot of no's? Yes, but I can't
Mm.
let the no's make me afraid of putting myself out there for all of the yeses that I'm going to get.
Mm.
And where the scholarships that I got, all the like big, huge $10,000 ones or the big, huge podcasts we all look at, no, some of them were $200. Some of them were, we'll buy you a free laptop. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
were whatever it may be, but we're still getting ourselves out there and things like that. So I just use that example to show I got a lot of no's, but I got a lot of yeses. And so we have to
Mhm.
stop being afraid of the no's and maybe seeing them more as a not yet, right? That okay, I got a no or a no answer because you're going to get that too.
Sure.
Let me review the data. Are these the best topics? Am I
Mhm.
being niched enough, or am I kind of just this like generic topic that everyone talks about? Does my bio really make sense and tell my story that's going to pull at someone and be like, I connect to that? Or is it just
Mhm.
kind of like I live here and I have a dog and I like, you know?
Yeah.
Or so there's like remembering to not be afraid of the no's, remembering to look at the data and seeing it as a not yet. So just want everyone to kind of remember
I love that
that as you head
actually. I
into
love
any
that.
strategy of pitching, it's okay to get a no. I get no's and I keep going and I learn from it and I move forward and we do our thing. But to talk about you specifically, so for a book, right? There's a lot of different areas there. We're
Yeah.
going to want people to have early access to it and, maybe talk about it or review it, things like that. So we might want to pitch to them, "Hey, I would love to send you my book. Maybe you have like cute stickers with it or something fun to make it that brand of yours. I would love to send you my new book with a little bit of swag from it. Is there a great address for this? I'd love for you to read it and hear your thoughts." You're keeping it super low key. You're keeping it low pressure. They're not like, "Oh my gosh, they're making me do this. And what if I don't like it? Am I out?" No, it's just going to be fine. And you're going to let your work and your style speak for itself and send those out. We're going to be intentional about who we choose to send those to because we're not going to
Yeah.
just send them to everyone,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you're keeping it low key and
Okay.
calm, but also showing like, I really see you as a fit and having that behind it. Creating that list of those people that are strategic and then sending those out. And as you're getting responses in, maybe someone's like, okay, but I don't really, you're getting the same question over and over again. You see kind of how to adjust the pitch where everyone's
Mhm.
saying no or everyone's saying yes. Then you're like, this is really working well. You're gathering
Mhm.
data, you're
Mhm.
pivoting, you're moving, you're going with it, right? So you start out and you get going and then you learn from that. But yeah, it's just saying, I have something cool for you. I'd love for you to tell me what you think of it. I'm really proud of it. What do you think?
And just like I think like to your point, being emotionally okay with unattaching yourself from the results to some degree, because if you're overly attached to them, like loving your book, telling the world about your book, and then what happens when they don't? Or like when you give a gift, like when you give somebody like a piece of jewelry, or my mom gives me clothing all the time, and sometimes like I really don't like it, right? Like so like it's I have to some degree I have to, it's a gift, and a gift is meant to be received as whatever that person needs to receive it as. But sometimes I think we get overly attached to the way a gift can be received or not, which I think is really interesting, especially when you pour your heart and soul into something, right? You
Mhm.
put your heart and soul into a book or a speech, or I mean any body of work. It's an extension of you, so it can be very personal. I think that's why a lot of people get hung up on the fear of no.
Yeah.
It's like easy for you to say, but it's me. They're saying no to me, and at least in some capacity, that's what it feels like.
Hmm.
I want to understand more your backstory, because like people like you fascinate me in the sense, I mean I mean that so sincerely. Like I come across so many different personalities. I recently interviewed somebody on the podcast who was a former campaign manager to a presidential candidate who won. Like I'm like, where did you come from? How do these how do these superstars, these rock star individuals get into positions like yourself where you're like, I found my thing, and I have a really good threshold. I'm like a pain threshold, but you have like a no threshold that most people don't have. Like, how did you become you? I want to hear your Rainmaker story.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I think that it's something that's been built up in me of just learning to ask, and then a lot of times people say
Mm-hmm.
yes. And so I mentioned the high school. I even think back to when I was a little bit younger, maybe like fifth grade, I think it was. And I wanted to start a dog walking business. And I went door to door and pitched to people like,
Oh.
can I walk your dog? Here's why. Got a lot of no's, but it was like I saw the yeses and the reward in that, and I just learned to kind of keep moving with that and to, let those ones go and realize it was part of it. It was part of the game, part of just being a human in general. Some are gonna say yes
Mm-hmm.
to us as friends, some are gonna say no, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So I had that. I had a neighbor who I think it was like 12 years old, and his wife got sick and he was going to sell the car. And I went over and pitched and I said, I saved $900. Can I buy the car? And you can see it every day and know who it went to. And like,
Oh,
he sold me his
wow.
car. And at 12 years old, I had this car
I
like
had a
right now.
car.
Like, and I would sit on the phone with my friends and, it was cool. I had a car, but I just learned this, like, you ask and sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no, but you come and you say like, here's why I think it'd be really good for you. And then that translated to, I was a teacher for 10 years
Oh
prior.
man, you can do that. You can do anything.
And so there would be roles I would think of like, okay, we don't really have a high school counselor, and I was really good
Yeah.
at getting scholarships. Here's the role I think I should do. What do you think? And they were like, yeah, go do that. And just having that bigger vision and being willing to say, okay,
Mm.
why would this benefit? I want to do it. I just need to show them why it would. And this started to translate into I had friends who specifically this one, she was telling me at lunch one day as teachers, yeah, I finished my PhD. I just need to do my internship, but there's nowhere I can do it. So I'll just never finish it. And I was like, no, 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 no. We are going
Mm-hmm.
to figure this out. Let's pitch to our principal. Can you do your internship here? It'll just be paid for you as a normal teacher, whatever, this whole thing. Wrote the email by the end of lunch. By the end of the day, it was a yes. And today she's working as the full school psych, has her PhD, all this stuff. So just, it's a skill that's been brought up in me, and time again, I just keep seeing the way there's value to it, and it's okay
That's
to
amazing.
ask, and we do have to get tough skin of the no's, and I've always had to rephrase it to myself, as I mentioned, of it's just a not yet, and maybe they are never gonna be a yes, but it's a not yet that someone will, and I'm just learning, how do I need to perfect my craft of pitching? How do I need to show that I'm here to serve you so that I'm someone who serves? And in the rooms that I'm not in, people start saying my name of
Mm.
like, oh, yeah, they're really good at this or that, that kind of thing, and
Mm.
building that up in yourself. And that's the name of the game of podcast and press tours is you're giving that value away, right? You're not necessarily getting paid for it, but to show you are the expert and people start mentioning your names. Writers start coming back to you over and over again from Forbes or from Women's Health,
Mm.
whatever it
Mm.
might be, because they're like, you're
Mm-hmm.
so good at that. You're my go-to expert, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Hosts start coming back. Hosts say you were great for that. Can you be my keynote speaker? I'll fly you down to wherever, right? And so giving that value, showcasing who we are, our expertise, and thinking about it from
Mm.
their benefit, because long term it is your benefit. You are building your name, even though maybe you're not making money off of that, or like you're not being directly paid to do this podcast interview or whatever it might be. You are building up your name and you are
Mm.
showcasing your expertise, and people, like I mentioned, start saying your name in rooms you aren't in, and that keeps that cycle going of bigger opportunity.
I'm in awe of you. I am. I'm like wildly impressed. I don't know if you know who this is, but you should. His name is Donald Kelly. He's been on the podcast before. He's a dear friend of mine. He owns a very, very, very popular, successful sales oriented podcast called The Sales Evangelist.
Mm.
And he wrote a book called Sell It Like a Mango because when he was growing up in Jamaica, he had to learn how to sell mangoes like literally in the streets as like a young little boy. You can sell a mango when everybody else is saying, selling a mango, you can sell anything. And so your story just, I think again, it's so fun. I'm a parent myself and I
Mhm.
have two little boys and I'm watching their natural personalities come out more the older they get, of course. And so like it's just cool to think that you as a child, as a little girl, just had these not nurture but nature like qualities from the jump, that then I'm so grateful that life has validated for you and has given you constant receipts of proof of concept that you keep pursuing bigger and bigger opportunities. What a beautiful little lesson to like. I'm just grateful you told your story. I think it's a really good reminder for all of us, to be honest.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah,
love that even like I have a daughter and thinking about I want her to be able to pitch herself, not
totally.
necessarily like to be on a podcast, but to say,
Totally.
me, like I am the one for this,
Yeah, 100%.
And
Yeah,
so,
especially
yeah.
especially in our youth, especially in the little ones, because man, I think you and I both know like the world's going to beat the hell out of them, and it's up to us to kind of help them, fight back. And so it's really cool that your little girl is a model like that in her own mom.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we do this fun thing on the podcast that the last question is for the guest to ask me. whatever you'd like to ask, because I've asked you all unscripted, selfish oriented questions like, hey, what about this? And hey, what, like, and you've just been such a great sport. And I think it's only fair that you kind of maybe put me on the hot speed, or a hot seat.
Yes. So I'm excited for this question.
Okay. Not get nervous.
I like asking people this
Okay.
because usually it makes people fumble for a second because they're like,
Challenge
I don't
accepted.
know. I want you to think about like what is the biggest thing you want to either brag about, or and it doesn't have to be like an accomplishment, but what's the part of your story that you think is like your
Mm.
unique piece or your different flavor to this world?
That's a really good question. Like when you ask people like, so what, and it's probably gonna like what you call like weed out those that are narcissistic. Like I have no problem bragging about myself.
It's a
Like,
question I ask at
ooh,
onboarding because it's so interesting to see where
yeah,
people are with
yeah,
being reflective on what their power is. And
yeah,
usually by the end they start to be able to phrase it, but in the beginning people are like,
yeah.
I have nothing. I don't know,
Oh, that's funny. Well, it's funny because it's like I think externally it would appear that my marketing acumen is something brag worthy. I've been a marketer consistently for almost 17 years, not to date myself, but like, right? Just been practicing some version of marketing discipline, marketing execution, marketing, anything. But I don't know if I would even rank that number one as far as like my number one brag worthy ability. I think the thing that the last 17 years has shown me is beyond the skill set that is marketing, that discipline that I love so much. Man, I don't freaking give up.
Mhm.
Like, and my husband laughs at me because the word that I use a lot is like, I'm resourceful. And he's like, you love that word. I'm like, well, I don't know a better word to describe what not giving up is. Like, yeah, there's grit and yeah, there's this. But I feel like I look at the Madonnas and the Lady Gagas and the Taylor Swifts of the world, and I'm like, damn, like they have reinvented themselves over and over and over again. And we always like applaud it. Like, oh my gosh, like the new album is out or the new this or what, now Taylor says we should be sad, we're gonna be sad or what, you know what I mean? But but every time they do that, it's a massive risk that it could be a complete and total flop,
Mhm.
right? I think anytime that you're an artist of any kind, and so like I think marketing is part art, part science. Like it's certainly in both spheres, and there's the overlap that makes great marketers who they are. But like I have reinvented myself more times than I can even tell you as an entrepreneur. And every time it's slightly terrifying, not even slightly terrifying.
Mhm.
It's humbling. It's sometimes it's a wild success. And sometimes you're like, what the hell was I thinking? How could I not have foreseen that? I'm a freaking marketer. And then you like, I've gone even recently last year, I did something that just didn't work at all. This year, I'm doing it again, doing, a brand new book. Like, of course, there's always be like, I have this really cool book. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's cool to be seen or, to be determined if it's going to be validated by the exterior. But like, I was literally thinking about this last night as I was going to sleep. I'm like, I don't give up. Maybe that makes me crazy, but I don't give up. And I'm always a little bit amazed if I like looked exterior to myself at the little girl who just finds a way to figure it out.
Mhm. I love that. That's a powerful skill that you'll want
Hmm.
to keep. And
Yeah.
I think your representation of it will impact others of that. That like it's normal to quote fail because I'm
Mm-hmm.
expecting to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's what we do with it. And I think that's
Totally.
what you're saying you do really well. And then I learn from it and I say, this year I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to try this, or this year I'm
Yeah.
going to do that again, but change it like that. And so that's
100.
that's a really cool piece that you have.
Yeah. But in regards to my own evolution as a personal brand, like that's the part where I'm like, I've had to reinvent myself.
Hmm.
It's not like I'm just trading in a car year to year. Like it's me. It's me that's doing the work. It's me that's getting upgraded. It's me that's, the new version of Veronica and it's always like so daunting, but here I am so many years later. I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm a crazy person.
Our business
Anyways.
is almost like our therapist a little bit,
Oh,
right?
dude.
Like,
Yeah.
it shows the weak points in us. It's
Oh,
like, "Oh,
yes.
shoot, maybe that's something from my childhood I never
Yeah.
worked out."
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
100. Yeah. Parenthood, entrepreneurship, marriage, those three things are the most humbling experiences I've ever had in my life.
They'll
And they
really
quite,
reveal some things that you're like,
yes.
"Okay."
Yes, exactly right. Well, you're a dream. Thank you so much for pitching yourself onto this podcast. Thank you so much for being a really good sport when I asked you like kind of specific questions. Thank you for your insight, your perspective that's unique. I love when guests challenge conventional wisdom. I love when you're like, yeah, I know the prevailing wisdom says podcast tour. I have a little bit of a different approach. Like I just love that and I appreciate you sharing that on today's podcast.
Of course, it was my pleasure. It was such a joy being here.
Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at @ViaRomney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.